So we're here today to talk about our favourite topic, concrete. So in front of me, I have a good guest, one of my favourite concreters in Melbourne, Ben Castelluccio.
Castelluccio it is.
Castelluccio from Casta Concrete Constructions.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Ben, we met you. How did we meet you again? Through the bank manager, right?
Correct.
Weird story.
Yeah, weird story. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I think we had a mutual friend, and the bank manager basically, I think, wanted to sort of make sure that we had a bit more security and introduce us to a law firm that specialises in all things construction. And yeah, we met Ping and yourself, and it's been like this way ever since.
Yeah, and we're big fans of your work because I have learnt so much about concrete myself.
Yeah, likewise.
And there was words that you used that I've never seen come out of a concreter's mouth before. You know, like elasticity in the concrete, and then the flow rate. I was like, okay, this is strange. So your first job with me was to do one of my properties that I had was building a nice house in Bojan North, and you came across and you said, I'll take care of this, and I needed a good concreter because I wanted to do a top job, and you came in and brought all the big guns, and I was like, oh, this is impressive. Oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. Oh, this guy's not cutting corners. And you helped me. Actually, we helped each other a little bit. We did the Dinsel basement wall system,
Yeah, correct.
which you never worked on, and then got you. Was it your father-in-law who was?
That was my uncle
Your
at
uncle,
the
sorry,
time,
your uncle.
and it was my foreman. So we both got them trained up in the Dinsel system.
Yeah, and you helped me, and I helped you. I said, let's do this. Let's
Yeah.
get this up. And I'm sort of, it can't be that hard. And it worked out pretty well. No blowouts, and we took all the right precautions.
Yeah, no, it was good, and it was a good property in the finish. That project turned out really nice.
I'm just sad because you taught me one thing about driveways, which was how to do them properly. And now every time I do a driveway with someone else, I'm like, mate, you're just not doing it properly. Because I couldn't believe that the level of, I suppose you sent me one of your guys to come around, and unfortunately for me, I actually covered that driveway up. It was supposed to be with tiles, with granite pavers, because that was the plan, but I wanted a new, good, strong substrate. And then the way your guys came out was full lasers, screeded everything, put pegs in, set the levels right, was ready for the concrete, just compaction. I've never seen a concrete go and compact the rock below. Usually it's just spread out and you walk over it, it should be fine.
Yeah,
Using bar chairs properly and then doing an absolute killer job.
Well, I suppose it just comes down to compliance. You got to do things properly, don't you? And you got to be able to justify your costs somehow.
And the cost was an issue. For me, it's more about quality,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
This is where it comes down to. So, I mean, this was a high-end home, and that's what we were doing. And then I wanted to make sure that, I didn't want to see, especially the front, and then something like a driveway, you don't want to see giant cracks, and there's the first thing someone's going to see. So, the foundations of a house sort of get pushed aside sometimes, and it's like, because concrete's so expensive, we're just trying to find a cheaper solution.
Yeah,
but then
correct.
you find out that it's actually, if you don't do it properly and you don't do the mesh properly in the right locations, you find out that this sort of bites in the ass later on, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, one thing with concrete is, you only get one shot. You get a finite tooling time, which is, generally that 4-hour period from when the concrete hits the ground. And it's got to be done properly. And it's unregulated for most of the in domestic anyway. It's highly unregulated. Like, you don't need to get that inspected, but if that was to fail, weeks and months down the track.
And you absolutely blew my mind when you actually had a guy come out and do a slump test for me. Do you know that? You actually got a guy out to do a slump test, and I'm like, what is that guy doing something? Why are we doing something? I'm like, that is the way it should be done. Well, right? Because you measure the concrete. Other guys just rock up, it's too dry, just add a whole ton of water, make it sloshy and easy to work with, but they don't realise it actually affects the quality of the concrete.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's part of our internal QA. Every job that we put down on the ground, we always have testing on. And we've done that because of our experience. I'm sure we'll go into it later on, but we've done a lot of litigation with you guys, and part of the process of that is sort of what steps and measures did you take, and we've sort of adopted that as part of our daily standards now to do that.
And that's what we're trying to encourage everyone in the industry to do, is to set a new standard where it becomes the norm to follow the good standard,
Yeah.
right? Because, I mean, you can look at concrete and it'll, how do you know how good it is inside? It's not until sometimes I find that I've done slabs in the past where my flooring guy comes in with the grinder and he starts grinding and he just says, oh, that's something weird about this concrete. It's just gone super soft or it's like flaky. I mean, on the outside it looks absolutely the same, but the quality inside you don't really know. And it's until I suppose we have some sort of standards that we must push on the industry and make sure everyone is sort of complying, that if the quality is not going to be there, the foundation of a house, which will just determine the life of this house, is not going to be there, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part there is a lot of regulation. It's just the way that it's upheld and inspected. Things aren't sort of, you can cut a lot of corners because until it comes to fruition or until it's there on the ground to be inspected, unless there's an issue, no one's actually going to go through it and see, like if you can see that there's cracking, are they structural, are they plastic shrinkage, how did this happen, this type of thing. But I think especially with non-structural stuff like, that's not like heavily documented, things that don't actually need to be inspected, you can actually cut a lot of corners. And I think that's really reflective in some of the price points with contractors from one contractor to another. You see that a lot in domestic paving. There's huge disparities between what A contractor and B contractor are charging. And for the way that I see it, anyone that's compliant, materials and labour, we're all pretty much paying the same. So there shouldn't be this much disparity. But the thing is there's a lot of tricks, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different, some really clever cost cutting. Like thickening the edges and you strip the boards off and it's perceived that it's that thick.
It's only 50 mil thick,
but
in
it's
the middle.
not in the middle. It's not. You talked about a lot of the things before: not using bar chairs, not compacting your sub bases properly, not putting in correct sort of crack control measures. There's so many things that you can do to sort of to cut costs.
And I had a tragic story for me, which was, I thought it was just absolutely pisses me off that this was still happening. My good friend was doing some concreting that had around his house. Now, this house is about 30 years old now, and the soil type is, reactive clay. And there was no water management on the outside, and his concrete had sort of collapsed on one side, right? So he ripped it all up and he wanted to redo it again. And I said, okay, cool. Just make sure you got good concrete. I was so busy at the time I couldn't come past and actually look for him. He said, yeah, I inspected the guy's work around the corner, and he goes, you did a good job, and he talked about this and that. And I said, cool. Done the job. I came past and visited him, and then I realised he didn't even put expansion foam up against the house. So he's now just concreted hard up against his cladding, which was just like a hebel, right? So now when that concrete expands, his hebel is going to be hit, and it's just going to crack, and it's going to move all his cladding. Yeah, and it's going to cost him now $1,000. And I thought to myself, why on earth would someone in this day and age still not be doing the absolute minimum of even like, surrounding pipes? It's there for a reason, and you saved yourself, $50-$40 for a roll. And not put it on, and now the owner, could his pay dues moved on, but now you're going to have a house that's going to be cracking and not maintaining. So, I mean, the something you brought up before was a point of entry, right? Because there used to be a joke when I first started construction is that concreters were just glorified screeders, right? That you can just grab a screeding tool and all of a sudden you can
just grab a tool and put an ad in the paper and you're away.
Yeah. What do you think about that as a rule for the industry? Because, I mean, carpenters are being pushed now to be qualified, right?
Yeah, I think all trades should be. And I've been calling for this for a long time. There's some great advantages to this, not only for the end user and people like yourself as builders or clients, but there's also huge advantages for people like myself that run concrete construction businesses, because everyone's sort of self-proclaimed qualified concreters, and for me, being an old school Italian, I was taught everything from, like one thing I love about concreting is it actually has most trades that run through it. You need to understand about invert levels and falls like plumbing. You need to understand about detailed excavation like, civil contractors. You need to understand formwork and carpentry. You need to understand steel reinforcement. You need to be able to read plans and set out buildings, like a builder would. So it has all these different facets throughout the whole construction industry within it. So it is a comprehensive trade. But the thing is, it's completely unlicensed and unregulated. And we find people now that are basically coming to us as they're qualified concreters, but they can only do one aspect of that, and that might be just screed and finish. You know what I mean? So I think it'd be great to have some uniformity. I also think it would be great to have some benchmarks, like you just talked about, like isolating concrete away from cladding, or from copper, or understand. Like there's so many things that we teach our guys within our business that a lot of guys sort of scratch their head. They've been doing it for so long, but just because they haven't been taught right doesn't mean that they've been doing it correctly for that time. So to get back to your point, I'm screaming for this.
Yeah, and we'd like to see an association maybe formed, and where some of the concreters actually unite together, and then maybe start setting the education system might be good.
Yeah, 100%.
This can be really easily done, really online, if you guys can record yourselves, but they'll always notice that the young guys don't seem to understand, for example, why things are done a certain way. Like, a conversation with an engineer would be great to have, right? Because he's designed it for a reason, and in his calculations, the thickness of the steel and all that has an effect on how that slab's going to perform, right? Because he's looking at the soil types, he's looking at how that ground's going to move, and then if you cut that one little corner, it's going to have a big difference in the way that slab is going to work.
Yeah.
Now you've seen. You've come from a domestic market, right? Mm-hmm. And you've grown up into more commercial, and what's your sort of I've noticed one thing about you is that you're sort of really now focusing on business training, which we're really happy about. And I don't know if we've had a part in making you looking at contracts as a
100%.
Yeah, as a really a high necessity rather than just actually doing a job, because there's a lot of guys out there doing a job are not getting obviously paid, and that's something you may have experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of times.
A couple of times. I've been doing this for a while now. 100%. Look, I think like most tradesmen, I was a tradesman first, and when I went out by myself, it was a cash in, cash out business, and we used to price per square metre, and as long as there was money in the bank, we're right, yeah. But as we come to realise, sometimes there's malicious intent, especially as you start to climb the ranks and you do bigger jobs, and the one thing with bigger jobs is there's bigger problems, and I think that's where we sort of really got well acquainted. Is our first sort of major case that we went through, and I learned a lot. And as a result of that, I made a decision then that I do need to learn to be a businessman. So I went back to business school, and I work closely with you guys now. So I suppose the biggest thing that my biggest takeaway with the industry at the minute is the level of risk and the way that builders do it. That's basically what it comes down to. And I think the concrete part of things we've always had a really good handle on. And, we learn. Every day we're learning. The regulations change. We're always finding with specs, the specs change. And when you go down that rabbit hole of why the specs change and you realise how these things have come about, it broadens your knowledge, and we also change our methodologies to sort of suit and accommodate those things, especially when it comes down to, different construction methods and trying to keep the same price points and the same sort of margins through there. You need to evolve all the time. But I suppose a big part of what we do now is contracts and contract departures, and even though it's your bread and butter, it's probably it's a hard thing for us to grasp at times, and it's a relationship that I've had with yourselves to sort of to sort of go through those things now, a part of all the pre-construction that we do, and I suppose we lean on you through the course of the build as well to get us through with things like EOTs and variations and the like,
Yeah, and that's great. And we'd love to see more guys like yourself. And I mean, you're a big advocate for us, which we really appreciate.
Yeah.
And then you tell other concreters, hey, if you've seen, like you've had a couple of your concrete friends, they've had their businesses expand substantially in terms of volume of work. But then there's also been some new challenges, which is always cash flow, right? Because you've got new guys, you've got larger contracts and larger sums of money. And, it's a lot of guys just assume, bigger contract means bigger profits.
No.
Doesn't mean so, especially if you're not doing the departures and what you're responsible for. Because, I mean, you guys in the ground, right? So there's always that part of how deep does the ground go? Like footings, right? It can be designed for 400 deep, which is, relatively okay, you can calculate. But if it's down to founding depth, as you start digging, you will start to find, holy shit, this is a big problem. It's a lot more concrete. It's a lot more material. It's added more days to the job, right? Yeah. And you've hit the nail on the head in terms of that you are now just focusing on the actual business part of it, because I feel like the concrete job you've now mastered, in the sense like you're always still learning, right? Any person's still learning, but you're now focusing on the business side of things because you're growing that business, right? And you're creating a proper business, which is creating a whole bunch of new generation of concreters that are educated.
Definitely.
And then that will allow you to give you technically your foundations for your business
pardon the pun.
are now a bit more solid, and now you feel more confident, right, taking jobs on. And then you said before, your bank manager now, looks more confidently at you because I suppose even having us on your side makes them feel like you're less of a risk, that you're not going to get paid.
Yeah, I'd like to think like we're a lot more. It's not a perfect science, but we're certainly a lot more watertight than what we've ever been. And a part of that is just being organised. And I think part of the sort of the due diligence process that we use is like to lean on you guys to make sure our contracts are right and that we're not taking on as much risk. I suppose that's the biggest thing these days is like the contracts that we're finding from principal contractors are really like they're really one-sided, and it's funny because I'm a country boy and I used to just basically sign anything that was put in front of me because I knew I was a decent contractor and our work would speak for itself. And it wasn't until I actually got involved in something pretty bad that I realised that someone was twisting the words within the contract to use it to their advantage.
Yeah. And it was always, it should be right, just sign here.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah.
And I swear I won't use this against you.
No.
And then at the end, that thing I said to you I was going to use.
And it's basically, everything's just all-encompassing. It's just all onto you, you know. Like we were doing a high-rise building once and I remember that, some walls got changed out to be concrete walls. And one of the lines in the scope or the departures were, you're responsible for all pouring of all concrete, How much can it change, in a high-rise building,
Yeah.
And then
you're the concreter, right? Well, that's concrete. That must be your responsibility.
Right. And it's like all of a sudden...
You didn't foresee that change?
No. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, these are substantial costs. It's like, well, you signed it. You do it.
And you're in I suppose what you call a challenging phase where, there's you're across multiple fields. So there's EBAs, right? And you guys now have to be on new rates. And with that comes new challenges, which is, downtime, right? Because if the job's not ready and you got guys waiting there and, the builder's making you pay for those guys just standing around, and you're sort of now looking at it at a different point because you now have to consider that situation where there will be delays. I mean, tell me a guy now that's not experiencing delays in their construction programming. Yeah,
that is part and parcel of all construction now. And the funny thing is that in the information era that we're in at the moment, everyone knows all the numbers, right? So like, on builder side, all their CAs and their PMs, they know exactly how much everything should be and they don't allow any contingency whatsoever. You can't have any you can't build in any buffers for delays, and like especially the program, and especially with the price points associated with it. So it's hard because everyone knows that it's going to happen, but like you're not allowed to prepare for it supposedly. So yeah, it's a tough one. But like I suppose like it's a bit like. It's a bit like, I always look, the analogy is like sort of like, hackers and antivirus. Like antivirus guys come up with something and hackers just work out another way to sort of get around it. And I suppose it's a bit like that with us. Like builders
the other way around, hackers create something
well,
and antivirus.
yeah, whatever.
Oh, maybe they're the same people, who knows?
That's
right?
it. So it's a bit like with us, the builders come up with these ways of sort of boxing us in, and we just come up with ways around it to sort of to try and get out of it. You know what I mean? So with EOTs and delays and this type of thing, we know it's going to happen. We're not allowed to talk about it, but we know it's going to happen. And I think you got to come up with strategies to protect yourself. And we lean on you guys to give us a lot of advice through that with the legal side of things.
Well, we've had our first builder come up to us and say, "I've never had an EOT done by a concreter before. It's the first time."
Really?
Yeah. I was like, wow, amazing. I'm like, just so you know, this is the conditions that you've set up as a builder.
Yeah.
You've forced these guys to put in the EOTs because if they don't, there's a good chance you'll hit them up with liquidated damages at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we say to them just every once a week, mate, to fill those forms in and put them in. I mean, you guys have got like rain delays. You guys have got so many things that in the scheme of trying to, like, you guys have to like mobilize, right? So the good thing about you, I like about the concrete is that you give each other a good chop out, once in a while. You got to bring in a crew, massive crew sometimes, and then you have to sort of work together to finish a job, and then you get a help out from the other guys, and that's, I suppose, a necessity of why you guys will succeed in the industry, is because you're competing against each other sometimes, but you're sort of still relying on each other to help each other out.
Well, the workflow is so dynamic, and there are times, like you said, where we need huge resources to be able to do what we need to do. But the thing is, it's not viable to keep those resources on the books full time. So we do reach out and call on our circles and our network, our greater networks, to be able to do that, which is sort of good. That's something I really love about our industry, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Now, you're a father of six, and live out in the country, so he drives for miles to get to work and back.
Yeah.
And you came past our house once, and then you've got a great family there. And I just said to my wife, how does he find the time to do anything? And something you brought up is, where do you find the time to learn? And you said, I do it in my car when I'm driving.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So one of the things that I set as a personal goal a couple of years ago is to try and read an audiobook once a week. And on average, I commute probably about 12 to 15 hours a week. And when I'm not on the phone, I'm reading books, doing audiobooks and listening to podcasts and that type of stuff. And I found it really interesting because if there's something that you want to hone in on, I always find with business it's whack-a-mole, so it's either, you either have leadership challenges or you're having, challenges with finances or whatever. You can hone in on that, And I think it's a great thing to use that time wisely.
And how are you seeing, because I know, for example, I was slightly affected, and you brought it up once, with all the government doing all these massive infrastructure projects, right? I think it was you that told me that once. It was like, you couldn't get concrete in the morning because all the trucks were going to do massive pours.
Yeah, this is huge for us. So, sometimes you'll go into, we'll need a stockpile of, class 3 rock, and then you go into a quarry and you'll see something the size of a football field, and it's like, oh no, that's earmarked for infrastructure. We're not going to be able to supply anything for a week and a half. It's really tough. And same with the guys as well. Like the price point at the top end of town is really quite exorbitant, really. And for us to pull. For us to get talent from the same pool, we have to sort of compete with those prices, or at least offset it with conditions to make it sort of viable for those guys to come and see us, or work for us. So yeah, it's the infrastructure stuff is really has made it challenging for us the last few years. That's for sure.
And this is what we're trying to educate people on as well. So when you see big government spending, I'm like, well, mate, there's a cost for that. And then the average house, believe it or not, when there's big infrastructure happening, the average house cost goes up.
Of course.
Right? Because the labour market just shrinks, and then the new rates go to the bigger end of town, and then your talent pool shrinks, and then you get a whole bunch of guys that are inexperienced being taught by inexperienced people. And then the guys that really know the high-end technical stuff don't have the time now to train the lower end of town, or even on the domestic market. And we're starting to see, I'm totally not against foreigners, but I start to see, being one myself, you start to see different cultures coming into the concrete game. Now, like growing up, for me, it was either you're Italian or Maltese, and your name was Joe, or, that was the good sign that you're going to get a good concreter, right? That was my joke for ages. And then that was then taught down to their kids, and then, it was like a generational thing of concreters. And then that skill set seems to be sort of disappearing a little bit because they sort of, I don't know, maybe retired and not teaching the next generation of the technical knowledge that should be around. Do you think that it might be a good idea for the government to back off a little bit? Like for me, I'd love it. Or me personally, what's your views?
In what regard?
Well, I mean, this is the problem, right? Because they're spending a lot of money and it's blowing out budgets left, right and centre.
Oh, in terms of the infrastructure stuff.
In terms of infrastructure stuff, yeah. To give you guys a chance to sort of, the guys in the middle and the lower end of town, give them a chance to sort of breathe and maybe just sort of reset themselves.
It just seems extreme. Like if you have a look at the tunnel works and stuff like that we only see one part of it where I live over, Greensboro way. Like the amount of plant and equipment and people, and like it's just extreme on every front, and not only that, but the timelines and the commitment to the people that are working there, like the hours and stuff like that. That's one thing that we are starting to see people down in the commercial sector are starting to emulate those conditions on site. Like, part of the contract departures now is that we have to commit to 10-hour working days. We have to commit to 6 days a week. They're the things that were basically, on the top end of town in the infrastructure. They're the things that they want to see in place because they have exorbitant amounts of money with all this specialised equipment and all this type of stuff, and they don't want to have it there for whatever reason. They've got to get these things moving on, and people are starting to do that. So, yeah, politically, I don't know enough about it to comment, but I would say that it seems very extreme and unfair, and there's huge impact in our industry as a result of what's happening up there.
Yeah. And when you say your industry, you mean actually construction in general,
well,
right?
Yeah,
you
correct.
know the other guys are probably, you would have had conversations on site with other trades as well, and sort of seeing that they're experiencing the same challenges in terms of material
100%. And the other thing is too, we've had so many people poached off us. I wouldn't say poached, but made offers that we have no chance whatsoever of competing with. And basically, a lot of people in my sector of the industry use us as a stepping stone to get to that top end of town. But it's going to be forever, right?
No chance.
And this is one of the things that we're trying to say to people. Like, and it's really funny because, for us when we put ads up and stuff, you sort of see people they're there and then they'll come and then they'll go and then they're back on the market again, and then you speak to them and they're like, we did our short stint and then everyone got laid off and then we're just waiting for the next round.
So it's concreting nomads.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So it's hard because for me, I'm my grandparents are foreigners, and it's that whole thing of there's a bit more loyalty, for for us, it's not about just like making the quick buck and then doesn't matter what sort of happens in between. We want that slow, steady, and consistent.
Yeah, and I think I do see that across some of your guys. Like Aaron is one of my favourite.
Yeah, we've had
or some people call him Aaron.
Yeah,
but,
Aaron. Yeah, we've had some good longevity with our guys. But we've worked really hard as a tight knit group to create that culture and we're reinventing ourselves like every year we've got a new game plan, we've got a new sort of level of vigor. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and you have to. I think it's got to be like that. And I suppose back in the early days, that was definitely one of the regrets of mine was, you thought you were on a good thing, and then you thought it was going to be the same. But it's like the world's evolving,
and changing.
Yeah, it is 100%. And the other thing is to how much we're affected by things like interest rates and things. You listen to those things in the news and you sort of go, oh yeah, but that's the big end of town, or that's the domestic market. No, it's actually us.
Yeah, they think it's just housing.
Yeah,
yeah. But then you don't know it's like the cost of finance, the cost of holding money, the cost of borrowing money to run a business actually goes up, which makes it even harder, which means that even when wages goes up, you've got larger capital constraints, and then you're taking on jobs, and then this is where we try and help everyone, especially if you don't get paid. Holy moly, there's that set a trigger off that could, ruin a whole bunch of people, especially good people.
Yeah.
And we try and support our primary goal is to support the industry and the people that are good at what they do, and then they go out and will train a new generation, and then hopefully we have some good operators, and then construction will be a lot easier. Because I used to get yelled at by some guys saying, hey, you're not doing that right. I'm like, yeah, good, tell me more. Because if I'm not doing it right, then you tell me, but not just like keep quiet and then, we'll cut the corner there, it'll be fine. It's not my problem, it's the builder's problem.
Yeah, that's right.
And then sometimes there's some things that I miss. I try my best to educate myself on every single trade and the complexity of them. And sometimes I even educate other contractors and saying, hey, you're not doing that right. Well, for one example I had was we did some townhouses, and there was a large footing at the entrance of a garage, and the mesh, when we went to close the handover, there was just this crack, and it just kept on growing and growing, and I'm like, you'd swear there's no steel in there. So I got a guy come out and do an X-ray for us, and he showed that the steel was there. It was just that when the concrete was poured, that the instead of being 50 millimeters cover, that the mesh was pushed down, and it was 200 millimeters cover. Now, structurally, they said it's fine, but at the surface tension, it's just going to create a giant crack. So we had to come in and epoxy the floor and fix up all those cracks. But that was something I learned, and I was like, oh, what's the solution to that? And it was like, well, you tie the mesh to the boards at the end, right? And it keeps it up at the same height, or you prop it up and then make sure that everyone's just thinking, no, it should be right. I'll just pull it up, right? And then this goes on, and we see this throughout construction, where guys don't understand the consequences of what they do and what they do wrong. And we've had an example for where concreters lately have been talked about this, where a concreter said to the builder, hey, if you don't tie this up, they want to have this exposed facade. And he said, if you don't tie these boards up, it's going to buckle and bow, right? And the builder said, no, it should be fine. And then when it buckled and bowed, he tried to hit up the concreter for 150K in rectification works, And this is where we should be, this is where we are trying to help these guys to say, okay, did you document it? Did you have that conversation, and did you notify the right people for not just the one-on-one talk? It should be documented to tell the builder so that you're not liable for it. But the fact that you actually spoke up is what you're supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
And especially in these D&C contracts.
Yeah. I
mean, they're relying on you to be the design engineer, right? Some of these jobs. Is that what you've experienced?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you touched on that before, because I talk about this a lot with other business owners, especially other concreters that I speak to regularly, and it's the way that they document these like situations. Gone are the days the old handshake deal, or even the old we call it the day book. you open the daybook and you're like, sign this. Well, anyone's going to sign anything now because it's not like it used to be, But I think if through the education we've had with you guys, now we go through the right channels. We reference any of the the variation procedures they outlay in the departures in the contracts, or at least have a proper paper trail and photographic evidence, and the way that that's stored and the way that that's logged. I think that makes a huge difference to the way
because it's going to give you the backup so that when things do go wrong, which at the moment are going wrong a lot for every business, that you have the right legal position to make sure that you're getting paid, or at least not losing a lot of money or leaving it on the table because of whatever the contract was designed to screw you over.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too, in terms of the hierarchy of construction, the builders have just had free rein for a long time to just push over subbies and just make them do whatever they want to do. I think it's odd these days that we're pushing back against a lot of things and saying, no, these aren't right, and they're trying to educate us. No, that's not the way we see it. We do it like that. So it's like, no, I'm really sorry, but we've got expert counsel that tell us that this is the way it is, and this is the way you need to do it, and they don't like that at all, But and I'm not saying it's a perfect science by any stretch, but it does safeguard you in a lot of stuff that you do. And I think the other thing is too, one, you want to claim all money that's owed, don't you? You don't want to leave any money on the table. So and I see that with a lot of businesses. They're just constantly chasing money because it's a lot of blurred lines. Maybe he was responsible for that. Maybe I should let that go. But now I think if you can educate yourself and understand definitive parameters, what's expected, what you have to do, and what you don't have to do. Because the other thing is too, a lot of builders will make up things as they go along. And if you're not knowledgeable, and this is one of the things that we teach our guys a lot, is question authority. Where do you reference that? What show me exactly where that is. We had an instance a little while ago where a builder said, I talk to the other trades. Right? And it says strictly in the scope that we have to interface with other trades and coordinate with other trades in order to do your job. Well, it doesn't say that you're not allowed to talk to them. It didn't work out at the time. So, when they go, all right, you're not allowed to do this, it's like, well, you show us where. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, all right, we get it, And the reason they didn't want us to do that is because they were trying to get a different angle to make us do something that we didn't want to do. And we knew that if we talked to these guys that we could expedite the way that we did things, but it wasn't to the builder's advantage, and that's the way that it played out.
Yeah. And the good thing is, I like about what you said before, is that now that you're pushing back, you are going to get resistance whenever you push something, right?
100%.
The laws of physics.
It's not pretty.
Yeah, but the good thing is, what we're telling is to the builders to start pushing back higher as well, back onto the developers and the job as well. It's not a matter of just signing these crappy contracts and then trying to push it and destroy all the trades, because if the trades don't survive, then the industry is not going to survive. You're not going to have any good guys left over.
You're trying to change the landscape. You're not trying to change the job.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's sort of. But you need unity to be able to do that. And I think a lot of the time, when you're fighting for scraps down at the bottom, a lot of contractors, we're basically bashing each other up in order to get what we think is a good thing, but it's crap what's left on the table, So I think we need to sort of create a space where people know. And I'm not talking about price fixing. I'm not talking about sort of being in cahoots. I'm just
saying no, right?
Yeah,
just
exactly
saying no
right.
to things. Say push. This is the new state. We don't do this anymore.
Exactly right. There's some really, like you said it before. We're in the ground, right? And there's this old sort of saying the builders wipe their hands together as soon as you're out of the ground because everything works, right? Like when you do your BOQs and your takeoffs, your frame's never going to change. Your tiles are never going to change, But the amount of concrete that goes in the ground, well, that can definitely change, So there's a lot of risk associated with what's in the unknown. And I think what's happening is developers are essentially sort of getting principal contractors to sign crazy contracts and take on crazy amounts of risk for the simple fact that they can just push that downstream onto us. And, right up until recently, and I say this in the last 5 years, I would have signed that. I wouldn't care because logic will say that if you're making me build on this and it's wrong, I'm not going to pay for that.
It is what it is.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So now there's this whole thing of you need to accept exactly the site as it is. Well, we don't even know what's underneath, So you've got to you have to understand what it is that you're getting into. But you're right. One of the biggest things we're seeing in our industry in the last sort of 12, 18 months is the accepting of blinding concrete. And if you don't know what blinding concrete is, it's basically if you don't achieve founding depth at a suitable KPA that's specified, that you will need to put a low-strength concrete up to what we call scheduled dimension at the bottom of the foundation in order to bring that back up, right? And that is depicted in a bore log from a geo, and you can only get a median. And generally what will happen is you have an existing structure and the bore logs are taken around the existing structure, not on the envelope of the building envelope itself. So it's never an exact science. It's always a median. And generally speaking, we can work out from the bore logs what the required KPA should be and get a rough idea. But the reality is that things change quite rapidly, especially with the big footprints that we deal with now. And we're finding that developers are getting their principal contractors to sign a fixed lump sum agreement on the amount of blinding. And that can change exponentially. And it's happening all the time. And personally, our company has lost a lot of jobs where we're in competition with other contractors that accept the risk, and we just won't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that should be like an absolute standard in the industry that we shouldn't be there to accept that type of risk.
And my suggestion is sometimes losing a job is not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes losing a job is actually the best thing that's ever happened to you, because if you're willing to take that risk and it goes wrong, and then you get wiped out. You know what I mean? It's like it's a lot of money that can be. I'm not talking about just blinding. I'm talking about just like risk in general. Like there's a what I say is everyone's doing a risk. Like you're running a business, right? Of
course.
There's a risk in everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're working in construction. There's a
calculated risk.
A calculated risk, right? And you can take, for example, 100 jobs on. They all have risks, and they all have relatively small, manageable risks.
Of course.
Or you can take on 2 or 5 big jobs that have a huge amount of risk
And put it all in black.
That's it, right? That's what I say. You're effectively just gambling to say, all right, if, by the way, if one of these big ones goes under and the other one goes slow, then I'm completely wiped out. But if I win, I'm going to win big. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. You know, slow and steady can win the race. As long as you survive in the industry, especially because the industry is in waves, right? Industry, as you said, it comes in waves. It's all on, then it's all you know. There's a global depression and there's no construction going on, and now we're in a weird spot, which is there's work, there's just not enough guys or not enough material to do all the work.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too. There's no like I touched on it before. Everyone knows all the numbers now, so there's not a chance to make crazy margins anymore unless you have really efficient practice. And I suppose that's one thing that we are in our business. We are really trying to polish, so less rework and a lot of pre-planning. I think everything goes down to plan. The old saying, what is it? Yeah, fail to plan or plan to fail, or whatever it is. But like we basically we put a lot of planning into what we do and educating you guys so you can execute really well. You want to be quick and you want to be thorough. And then you want to get on to the next thing. And the last thing you want to be doing is having delays and this and that and whatever. And I think this where a lot of this goes back to the rules and the departures and understanding the specs and all this type of thing is like you can actually get caught up in a lot of blurred lines where, the builder's representatives don't actually know the game as well as you. And they will blow the lines to try and play you to their advantage. And if you don't know what they are, you can get led down the garden path. So, yeah. Executing really well and being efficient at what you do can actually ensure that you have some decent margins.
Yeah. and running the business, right? Not just doing concrete.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And understanding finance, I think, is that's the biggest. The whole business is governed by numbers, and you have to understand that. And I think a risk associated with those numbers too is the other one, because if you do have clear, defined parameters on how much risk that you're actually you're exposed to, you can make an executive decision of whether it's a viable job or not.
And this is one thing I like about yourself is that you said before that you were constantly changing, constantly learning. I'm like, yeah, because you are reassessing everything. You'll do a job and you reassess it and you see how did that go for me? Am I just doing what I'm doing for the sake of doing it? But the market is changing, right? So you have to adapt to the market as well. Like when there's a shortage of materials, if you're not adapting to that conditions, like you say, I have to deliver on site and I've priced for us 8 months ago at this price, and then all of a sudden the concrete's gone up and I haven't factored that into my contract, then it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Deliver the contract, or do I cancel it and shut down my business and all that sort of stuff? But it's also just being adaptive. I mean, one thing I like is you've talked to some other concreters and you always push them our way, which is great. And some of those guys now are on our sort of retainer system where we're trying to assist them and making sure they're doing all their departures and following their contracts as they're going along. And then one thing that brought up to our attention was retention, right? Now, because you guys work on such large projects with some large sums of money, 2.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but 2.5% on $1 million is a lot of money,
Correct.
right? And that catches up on you. Your margins might be close to sometimes even that, right? So, and one of our clients had, like $1 million outstanding on just retention money, right? And with no PC date, right? The builder said, "Oh, when is PC?" Well, I was like, "Well, your concrete, you're at the start. So when is practical completion? When my job's complete? Is it a few months after my job's complete? Is it at the end of the project? Is it going on and on? How are you finding sort of dealing with this retention money?"
Look, it's tough. It is really tough, and I think you're dead right. There's a lot of blurred lines there on what is PC. Is it PC? Is it your PC or principal contractor's PC? I think, like, especially if you're in the high-rise game or mid-rise, apartments, these type of things. As a structure company, you can be there like 18 months before you can complete your works 18 months before the building's fitted out and handed over. So if you're with your 5% security, you get 2.5% on PC the builder 18 months after you finish your work, and then another 2.5%, another 12 months after that for DLP. Like, it's 2.5 years is a long time, and builders will blow the lines. I don't believe I've actually ever had a builder that will announce PC. They just don't. And now one of the things that they're actually chucking into is that the DLP period will actually restart if there is any issues in that DLP period. So they're just constantly kicking the can down the road. And I've always thought that builders use your retention money for their cash flow purposes. So that's only speculation at this point. But
we cannot confirm.
Yeah, we cannot confirm, but I can confirm that it's very, very hard to retrieve. And look, if you're working on sort of basic 10% margins, then 5% is held in security. And some builders, I think, have malicious intent. We are still chasing now retentions and security from years and years and years ago. And builders just think after that particular time, some builders,
everyone forgets.
Yeah, of course, exactly right. But we don't. And, it's very hard. So I think that's a really messy part of the industry that needs to be cleaned up. And, again, it needs some hardcore regulation on how that's retrieved and how that's sort of handled.
And one thing that Level Playing Field, we put a massive submission in to a parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah, that's right.
About how people aren't getting paid. And one of the things that popped up was where is that retention money being held? If it's in the builder's bank account, and then should they liquidate, the liquidator has access to those funds, and then just says, oh, whatever, it gets washed up. But it should be held in a trust account that it's allocated to you guys to get back into your pockets. And you could imagine how many businesses would be thriving, or at least feeling like they have to reduce their risk if that money, cash flow, comes back in the business. So you're looking about $1 million. Of
course.
If I injected your company with $1 million worth of cash, you can just say now, okay, great, I don't have to borrow money anymore to fund the next project. And then, payment terms, if it's 30, 40 days, it's okay. I can ride that wave because my cash flow, goes down and the money comes in. And like us as builders and developers as well have that same problem. Like when we put in money or requests for quantity surveyors to pay us, there has to be a certain amount of cash I know that I'm not going to get, and I have to ride out the storm. So I had grand ambitions to grow the business, but I was like, if I don't have another $500,000, $1 million cash lying around to ride out the wave, I can't pay my guys.
Yeah.
And then that just spirals out of control, right? Because you're like, I don't trust that builder. He's got the shit payment terms. I'm going to go to the guy who's got better payment terms, right? And I think what's going to happen is, as you were saying before, you're doing the right thing and somebody undercuts you and takes on that risk. And I think that'll filter out now, especially this time, that your business will be a bit more long-term thinking, not that short-term gratification, but long-term thinking, which will be that, we'll grow steadily and we'll grow, but we'll survive. There's no point in just jumping in and then getting smashed and then, wiping yourself out and then resetting again.
Yeah.
Now you look at it more as a consistent business model, and something that I'd like for everyone that's listening to this, especially if you're in concreting or any other construction business, that think about these strategies. Don't think just say it's next week or week after. Like, what's your long-term plan for your business? It's not just, hey, I'm going to make $1 million signing this job on. It's, what am I risking to make that $1 million?
Yeah, exactly right. And sort of understanding, the risks that, like every job and every builder, every scenario has its own sort of bespoke set of risks, and sort of educating yourself as to, how they can sort of play. I think that is really the sort of the fundamental principle of what we try and assess every job on its own merits now, is essentially how much risk is associated, because the risk is like also determines your margin as well. It's one thing to think that you're on a high margin job, but if you've got huge risk associated with it, well, that margin's not going to be real. It's not going to materialise as the way that you see it at the start.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming and see us and having a chat.
No worries at all. Thanks very much.
I would love to. Where could people come to see you? Because I'm sure there's maybe some concreters out there that want to learn something about concrete, and I'd highly recommend they work for you if they want to learn anything about concrete.
Thanks. I'll just visit our website, www.casterconstruction.com.au.
See, you're so old, mate. www. No one says that anymore, mate. You can let it go now.
HTTP. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming and seeing us, and we'll stay in touch.
Done. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to reach out to Ben, obviously hit him up on his website. If you want to learn about more about concrete, we'll be doing more and more interviews with other industry professionals, and hopefully you guys learn something. Thank you.
This podcast is produced for educational purposes to give you general information and a general understanding of the law and should not be considered legal advice. Any advice is general in nature and does not take into account your objective, situation, or needs. Because of that, you should seek professional legal advice before acting on any of the content.